I'm just going to start with a correction that I may have got, no, more than likely I've been reminded by Pat, or corrected by Pat, that the numbers around private versus public schools may not have tipped over, and in fact that may just be a number of high school students in Australia who are the majority private, not the entire sector. So, yes, I apologise to Marion for that mistake, and to everyone here.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, look, I agree that the rise of the right and these symbolised by Trump and Brexit and Hanson is a real danger. And I agree that it is in part a reaction to neoliberalism and the effect of that on people's lives. But I think we have to have, again, look a bit more closely at who's supporting these different movements, and also the percentage of people voting for them, because I don't think it's true, for instance, that in Australia Hanson has anything like the support yet that some of the others do. And even if you look at Trump, less than 50% of the American people voted, and then he got a majority in key states that allowed him to have the majority in the Electoral College. Clinton, despite all her faults, actually got a majority of the popular vote. Now, that's not to diminish this phenomenon, but to say that we have to be realistic about that. The same thing happened with Brexit, and what we're seeing here is that the majority of people in the centre, if you like, just haven't voted because they're so alienated from by a lot of the things that have happened in terms of rising inequality and the distance between the political elites of the main parties and their real concerns. But I just wanted to say that there's also been a parallel rise of the left in reaction to this, as there was in the 1930s. And if you look at the Bernie Sanders movement in the United States, that was a real mobilisation of millions of people who wanted a radical progressive solution to a lot of these problems, who are not racist, who are not
sexist,
basing themselves on the politics of fear, but are saying we want a more collective solution. And in Europe, I think it's worth reminding ourselves that the two testing votes that we've had since Brexit, there's been Brexit, but then there was the Austrian presidential election where a far-right candidate was defeated by an independent Green candidate. That happened in December last year, because the left and centre forces mobilised behind that candidate. And also the result of the Dutch elections, where not only did the far-right racist candidate not get the predicted vote that he was supposed to get, but there was a left progressive candidate who got a lot more votes. But it's very notable that in that election, the sort of centre parties, including the Social Democrats, which is equivalent to the sort of Dutch Labour Party, and some of the centre parties got a lower vote. So what we're seeing really is a polarisation of politics. And there is some hope for progressive politics, I think, but what our challenge is to be able to give some hope and some progressive solutions to those people who, have lost their jobs, who are alienated by the political elites, and who are looking for different politics. But we've got to convince them that it's not the politics of fear and racism that's going to be the solution.
No, I agree entirely. I mean, the voter turnout in the UK and for Brexit, but that's exactly my point. Why isn't the centre going out and voting? Why are they apathetic? Why have they lost hope? Well, that's the question we have to answer. Yes, there is a progressive politics, but alone it's probably not enough to challenge the rise of the right. Because we have to remember, the right has huge financial and corporate interests behind them. let's not forget that the one parallel between events occurring in parts of the world today and the 1930s is that the corporate elites in the 1930s, the industrial elites in Germany and in Italy, supported right-wing candidates against left-wing candidates. The fear of communism in places like Italy and Germany drove the dominant classes to support Hitler and Mussolini. These weren't popular leaders brought to power by electoral victories. These were people who were elevated solely to defeat the left. And in a way, I'm not comparing Trump to either of those individuals, but in a way, at the key moment of last year's electoral campaign, when the Republican Party was fractured and they didn't want to support Trump, it was the corporate elite that funded the Republican Party that pulled it together. And there's been a lot written about that since then. So we have to see those forces very much now allying themselves in defence of those privileges that they've built up over 30 or 40 years. So yes, I agree with you. The progressive political position is not hopeless, but the forces against it are powerful.
You partly answered my question actually when I since I put my hand up, but I've been, Pauline Hanson gets all this attention, yet she gets less votes than the Greens, and the Greens are basically what used to be called sort of slightly left and is now, because of the withering of the left, probably the most left-wing party that's in the mainstream, apart from the Socialist Alliance and things that exist but in name only, really. Why has the left been so inarticulate? One of the things that amazes me is if you ask a person in the street, particularly young people, they have a far more socialistic approach to life than the current political dialogue would suggest. And it's as if they have no voice, and it's almost as if the left has no spokesperson, no answers, and I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is almost totally isolated even within the Labour Party, and yet has immense public support. Do you think it's only a corporate support of the right that gives this immense bias to the right? I mean, what's wrong with the left that they haven't found any sort of spokesman who's taking anybody with them? I'm at a loss to understand this phenomenon, I must confess.
That's a very good question, and I think there are a couple of things that we should keep in mind. One is that the neoliberal project in the 1980s became hegemonic. That is, left and right parties, that is the mainstream left and right parties, both bought into it. So Labor in Australia under Hawke and Keating attempted to create what would we call a more socially conscious version of the neoliberal project. And I don't want to be too harsh on Hawke and Keating because they were blowing with the global winds, and they attempted to bring in a economic reform package that didn't entirely disadvantage working people. Not entirely. Not in the way that it occurred in Britain under Thatcher and elsewhere. And in the UK, Tony Blair came to power in the 90s with a very conservative framework. I mean, I think the left-right notions that dominated the 19th and 20th century, we have to rethink. The Labor Party is progressive on some issues, but it's entirely reactionary on quite a few others. I have been a long-time Labor supporter and member until quite recently, when I decided that I could no longer be a member of a party that condoned and supported a policy of offshore detention or supported US foreign policy overseas. Now, but there are many aspects of the Labor's economic political program which I find still more compelling than that of some of the other parties on the left. So there is a fracturing in the left and the right. The other thing I'd say about Hanson, I agree, Hanson, you know, and this is the point you made earlier, Hanson does not get the political or electoral support. Sorry, she gets far more, I guess what we call it, public notoriety or time in the press than electoral support. Absolutely. She's not a major political force in Australia. But if you combine her with the sort of far right that vote for the Liberal Party, you start to have a different picture of the sort of reactionary elements in the Australian electoral framework. And if you see the Liberal Party now as largely a party of reaction, then you can see that as a bloc. The coalition
Plus Hanson.
It does make us think about, I think again about Hanson's capacity to influence the political framework. As we know from 1996, when Howard more or less adopted her foreign policy and her racist rhetoric. So she has had, I think, an influence on political discourse and policies in Australia far out of step with her actual electoral support. What's the future for the left? Well, I think there is a progressive politics that's emerging that's actually quite compelling. It's happening in Latin America, it's happening in some parts of Southern Europe, it's happening in places like the UK and the US as well. And I think, you know, they're fortunes that we should follow and see play out in the next few years, hopefully.
Okay, who's next? Okay.
What role do you think elections have played in the rise of far right? Because I forget what you said, some people have lost faith in, I don't know, democracy or something. I think they've lost faith in elections. Elections are a joke. They're not really, you're basically choosing between the ruling class. Labour and Liberal were so boring the last election. There was just a lot of nutcases on the right, and they kind of play into the whole confusion that the media can. Like, I think a lot of far right has learned is that you can just sow confusion. You don't even have to prove anything. You just have to sow confusion over and over again. People get confused, and then they just lash out at the voting, and they get pissed off when they're voting because it's so boring and they don't feel like it matters anyway. So I was just to round it up. It's like, what role do you think is electoral representative democracy going to play in the future?
I think it plays a large part. We saw with Obama's election that sort of optimism surrounding it. You know, millions of grassroots sort of activists got out on the campaign trail, and there was a real energy in the US, I think, in the lead up to that election and in the aftermath of that election. We had our own moment here in 2007. I don't know if people can think back when Kevin Rudd was elected. I remember the next day sort of feeling that the heavens had opened up and the sun was shining. It was actually a very nice November day, very warm, and there was a real feeling of optimism that the bleakness of the Howard years had ended. I think elections are part of the answer. It's where I agree with you is that the electoral choices don't offer us a great deal of difference. But we've seen in recent elections in parts of the world a change. I think this polarisation that you spoke about earlier is leading to a different political framework as well. I think we are pretty much seeing in Australia in a very gradual way, not in the way that has occurred in the aftermath of the last election in the UK, the last national election when Miliband lost, or in the US with the rise of Sanders or the sort of competitiveness of Sanders. I don't think we've seen that same sort of propulsion of a progressive politics, but we're seeing a gradual shift in Australia in the way that Labor is trying to differentiate itself from the coalition on a number of key issues. It will be interesting to see how that goes over the next few years. So again, I think on a number of policies, there's a long way to go for the left to take ground back in Australia. I think when history writes, or when people write the history of this period in Australia, the policy around refugees and asylum seekers and the sort of wedge politics around race, I think will be one of the great blights. It's a real stain on the history of this country. But there is a progressive politics emerging that we shouldn't discount altogether. But again, the thing I say to students say this to me all the time, and I say, well, if you want a progressive politics, you've got to get out there and make it happen. We are all authors of the world we live in, and that's something that we often forget. And I think that's also part of that discourse that neoliberalism created. That somehow the forces that define the world are far greater and natural, and therefore we should just play along with them. The market is this great deistic force that determines everything, allocates resources effectively, creates prosperity, and the best thing we can do is let it work its power. Well, that's that. In many ways, that dehumanising and disempowering narrative has had a really negative effect on how we see ourselves in the world.
He's saying the market is a religion.
Oh, the market is a religion, yes. And, a bit of sacrilege around the market might not be a bad thing in regards to the market.
Okay, who's next? Who's next? Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Hold it up. Hold it up.
I was just proposing your comment that the one thing about Trump that he did was get TPP, and the market was to take a step backwards because the TPP was all corporate.
Indeed, but he's also announced huge tax cuts for, I mean, this is that, and one of the reasons I didn't go into that, I've got a note here. One of the things that we can say, one of the reasons I think we can talk about the bankruptcy of this ideology of neoliberalism is the contradictions of these populist leaders around the way they're playing it out. They're drawing in people around the very, opposing the very policies that have been at the sort of the foundations of neoliberalism. The free market, the deregulation of labour, a whole range of things. But I'd be surprised if those policies don't come back in a different guise under these leaders. Maybe not the TPP.
I just wanted to say, with the rise of Sanders, in terms of the subversion, in terms of the DNC supporting Bill Clinton and sort of subverting his campaign about 2/3 of the way through the election, and that's happened before in the U.S., but it just kind of shows you we don't really know how it would have played out if he had a fair go at it, in terms of his ability to compete with Trump. But it shows you how sort of the hegemonic center can sort of play it their way in terms of manipulate, in some sense, subvert those left candidates.
Oh, indeed, and we have to remember that the Clintons are well known for their links to Wall Street, and the Democratic Party itself is, which he was railing against. So I'm not surprised that Clinton received a great deal of mainstream support in the US. And there was a lot of fear-mongering around what Sanders... I mean, one of the typical arguments that is made by the centre around progressive candidates is that they'll wreck the economy. That claim was made over and over again. We've seen it here in Australia. That is really part of mainstay of the arguments against voting for Labor, that they have less economic credentials than the Liberals. I mean, there's no empirical evidence to support that at all. I mean, there's a famous photo of Thomas Friedman with Augusto Pinochet, One of the points, again, this contradiction in neoliberal, in the whole neoliberal mantra. I mean, Pinochet was responsible for the expansion of the Chilean state. Dramatic expansion around military spending, a whole range of surveillance and other repressive policies. He did just destroy the welfare state. He did. He privatised all national industries. Within 3 years of the neoliberal project in Chile being implemented, the Chilean economy shrank by 25%. It was 25% smaller as a result.
Catastrophic.
This notion that right-wing political parties, the conservatives, that neoliberals have a better economic record is just propaganda, really. There's no evidence to support it, and if you go from 1973 through to 2016 and look at the waves of prosperity and recession in Australia, you don't see any correlation with the party in power. Malcolm Fraser oversaw a recession. Hawke took Australia out of a recession, and then had one. And so we have these boom and bust cycles. I'm not saying political parties don't have an impact on economic policy, but there's no correlation between left-wing politics and political and economic crisis. But that's an embedded notion in many parts of the world, and that's something I think that the left has to fight, or progressive politics has to fight quite dramatically.
Okay, any more questions or comments that people want to make? Yes? One, we're coming back again. Okay.
Just a quick one, don't worry.
It's good.
I've got what I hope is one.
You're the next one. Okay.
What do you think of the value of competition? Because that seems to be touted as like a virtue now. How do you see that as riddled through society?
Okay, so years ago, I was in a class and a very respected political economist said, someone who lived through the end of the last decade of the Soviet Union, but also had lived in the US for many years, said that he didn't really want to live in a country he didn't really enjoy living in a country that didn't provide healthcare for its population. Talking about the US. He'd rather if the private sector did not care for our financial resources did not determine whether we got healthcare or not. But then he said, I also lived in a place where I really didn't enjoy my sneakers being made by the state. And he told a story about how he lined up for hours to get a new pair of sneakers, and they only had size 10 left feet shoes available because that's what the factory pumped out for weeks in the hope that they could meet their quota. So there is a sense that we need to think about the diversity around and the needs that in more sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, sort of complex ways than just seeing it as the market is responsible for everything or the state is responsible for everything. I mean, competition has been around for a long time, but should it determine whether someone has a place at school, or whether people can get around the city effectively, or whether people can feed themselves or house themselves? So there are the things I think we probably shouldn't leave to competition. But there are many parts of our lives that might benefit from people being able to use their initiative and their capacity for creativity. I don't know. That's just my view. I don't know if that answers the question at all.
Okay. Charles?
Charlie Bradley. I want you to perhaps comment on something I've been hearing in this area, particularly with regard to electoral politics. You see, it's in the vibes. It's in the vibes. What the folk are saying is that a lot of the electoral choice is based on sentiment and not on rational thought about the issues. And we get caught up a great deal in what people are supposed to be thinking, when in many cases they're not thinking, they are feeling. And Trump got people who had a sentiment to support what they felt, not necessarily what they thought, or in respect about it. It's not empirical, you don't have the empirical evidence. But people are not concerned about the empirical evidence, it's how they feel about the situation. Can you comment on that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I don't think feeling or thinking are necessarily entirely divorced from each other. They're interdependent. But you know, the feelings these feelings, this vibe, has also been constructed by a long period of shaping the way that we, feel about the world, feel about our place in it, feel about others, and there is I think there's a pretty clear distraction, just sort of politics of distraction as well that's going on. The fear and the notion that we're under assault, and that as that placard, the message on that placard that or sign that I mentioned before about niggers taking jobs and welfare. This notion of this feeling that other people are responsible, that others are responsible for our, fortunes, is something that has become quite pervades much of the public discourse. I mean, one only has to turn on. When I used to drive to work, I used to turn on Alan Jones in the morning every now and then. Not often, but more often than I really needed. But occasionally to tap into what people were talking about. And the number of times people would say things like, I can, remember discussions around, you only have to open up the property prices, and someone will talk about foreigners. Not. I was telling a story the other day. Not negative gearing. That's not the, or not the inequalities in our society, or not the, the sort of property class being able to replicate itself, but this notion that foreigners are driving up prices. The rational discussion is pushed to the side, the thinking discussion, but that comes from somewhere. It's not, yes, there might be an innate human tendency towards feeling, but I think it's also a constructed notion as well. It's, and that's something that we need to challenge. We need to get out there and challenge that at every opportunity.
Well, I just think that it's also about institutionalisation. The way that we're actually functioning, or maybe not functioning that well in this society. Like having had a brief stint, for example, in the NDIS, where jobs are described in terms of business, like the jobs that you're doing to actually provide provisions for people with disability, like people are actually described in terms of business officers. And it's actually, the conversations that we were having with people were about, setting up services and paying for them, not about sort of disability or experience or a whole lot of other complex issues. I think, the way that maybe, it's the way I think that what I understand is that, the way that policies are actually created these days, it's not an easy process. The way that people in the community engage with government, to talk about welfare provisions or whatever, it's quite narrow. So that's another way I think that the way things are, panning out, and it's quite restrictive. I think that, I come from a social work background. I've been trying to get into jobs in government, sort of like around social policy, for example, and just looking and attempting to get a job in that area. I noticed that predominantly in terms of social services department policy making, it's sort of predominantly about sort of like people with economics degrees in commerce and business and law, and it's not about, it doesn't seem that there's a great, just looking at something like that, it seems to me that's about an institutionalisational way of understanding what goes on in society and how we might respond to what the problems are, what we need to do. I think it's an institutional thing, and I think the other issue is that another one for me is about the way that policy, what is in policy, the way that the left, what we've talked about, and maybe what's been talked about maybe in the 60s and 70s, where there was a strong push that's been colonised in policy, in social policy. And I think that's a difficulty, to actually respond to that, because it's so complex, and it's all about lots of stuff about human rights and policy, but it's actually neoliberalism is a predominant sort of approach that comes through. So I think that it's about what we have to actually create our agendas, but it's a very complicated situation that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, I agree entirely with much of what you said. There was one of the most sort of common statements made by the indignados, and if Simon had made it here tonight, I would be able to say more, was around this notion that people are not economic statistics. The one that comes through was that we are a society, not an economy. This idea over the last 30 or 40 years that we subvert our social needs to those of economic needs has become sort of
It's the standard.
It dominates. A policy, an idea, a need is almost always referred to the Productivity Commission, a cost-benefit analysis. So there has been a real economic takeover of the way that we can conceive of life, and that is a very, as we've seen, I think it's a very damaging way. It dehumanises us. It individualises us, and it removes the capacity, I think, for us to think about what we really value, and what most of us often value. In 2000, just interestingly, in 2001, prior to the election, there were polls conducted, or surveys conducted of voters, and the top 5 issues in Australia leading up to, this is the Tampa Children Overboard 9/11 election, the top 5 issues were education, healthcare, pollution, or the environment. I'm just trying to think of what 4 and 5 were, but they were 3. This is at a time of
intense,
intense, threat, global threat, and the sort of fear mongering around Australia being swamped by foreigners, and yet people still put those issues at the forefront of their political interests. So there is a sense that that this has been removed from the public debate and replaced by this notion that we need to think about what the economic outcomes are all the time. Part of that survey, one of the things in that survey was that the majority of people voted, I can't give you the exact stat, it was a long time ago, but it was the majority of people would support a small increase in taxes if they got an improvement in social welfare.
Would you like to go ahead? Hang on, you need.
Just wondering, to what extent do you think that demographics would have affected that. I mean, the increase in the number of elderly people.
Yeah,
Total population.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's very hard for me to say. I mean, some people would say that ageing population leads to increased conservatism, but I'm not sure. I mean,
It's got to pay, there are fewer people to
yeah, certainly. I don't think that's part of why we've become so economically driven. I think that's an ideological project, that has, and a political project that has been ongoing for some time. And one of the interesting things I'm seeing at universities is an increase in the number of retired students, people who have retired from their professional lives, taking up education again, and a lot of higher education, and they're bringing their experience and their values into that space. And in fact, I don't see that conservatism, and that might be a small, a very small and unrepresentative snapshot of the total population. But in fact, there is a great deal of progressive sort of viewpoints of those with those people that I'm coming into contact with. No, I understand that. I'm not sure that's had an impact, but I can't say for certain.
Okay, maybe we'll start to wind it up here, but I'll make a comment back to you as well. This is a giant fear-mongering exercise again to, cut welfare, saying that there's too many people needing welfare. But try to think back to just, say, 30 years ago, what was the life expectancy of people in Australia? Today it's about 15 to 20 years more. So people are living longer already, quite significantly, and yet has there been an economic catastrophe related to that? No. The expenditure on the pension is less than the expenditure on tax concessions to superannuation contributions. It's less. So no, it's again something we need to keep talking about, because even though the population of older people is higher in proportion to the whole population is also bigger. And productivity has increased a lot in this last 30 years, and we can expect it will increase into the future. So I think we have to be prepared to argue this out with those people who demand that welfare be cut, to deal with this terrible old people, which is, all of us are going to be that one day. All of us. Yeah.
One day. Oh, good.
Yeah, but you are now, but even the younger ones in 30 years, they'll be in the same spot. So everyone. Yeah.
Inevitable.
Yeah. Okay. So on that cheerful note, I'm sure we haven't exhausted this topic, and it's a little early, but I think we've all said our piece. So let's say thank you very much to Dr. Noel Bassil for this.